think we all know that feeling that we're playing a song and then there's this one place in the song where we just always seem to be playing the same thing and it's difficult to find something new. So one of the ways that I like to deal with this is actually quite simple, and that's what I want to talk about in this video, because I think it's really a lot more useful to start working at what we already know and the basic stuff that we have available, and then try to get something good out of that, instead of going immediately to a million different shiny Star Trek scales that we anyway can't make any music with. My name is Jens Larsen, learn jazz, make music. By now I've checked out a lot of solos, I've transcribed a lot of stuff, and I think every time I come across the things that I think this is really great, then when I transcribe it, when I analyze it, then most of the time it's not complicated. It's really good and it's different from how I would normally play it, but it's still using really basic things. So that's the process that I want to talk about now, where I'm going to go over different ways to just take really basic things, just the basic arpeggio of the chord and the scale, and how you can use that and expand on it and turn that into 1,000 great licks. So in this video, I'm just going to take a basic C7 chord, and then I'm going to improvise over that using the context around it. So that'd be an F major scale, so that would be this scale. And in that position, the arpeggio would be something like this. Even though I'm mostly going to be talking about the C7 arpeggio, I think it's important to keep that scale, which is just sort of the entire context that this chord and this arpeggio is found in there as well. We don't want to have too many separate things happening. We kind of want to tie the different important parts of what we're making music with together. The first two suggestions here are really just about getting to know the arpeggio better and being more free when you're improvising with it, because we tend to just practice it in one way, running up and down the arpeggio, and then it never really gets any further than that, and maybe there's just something more to be found than just playing the notes in that order and not thinking about it. So the first thing to look at here is you don't always need to play them in the same order. We tend to think about arpeggios as just being 1, 3, 5, 7, but of course you can change that order and make other melodies. And just a few simple examples of this sound like this. And if we take that second example, and then use that on the first few bars of a blues in C, that could be something like this. You're probably already familiar with chord inversions and how you can change the octave or the order of the notes, and that way come up with a lot of different chord voicings from basically the same chord. And of course, you can do the same with an arpeggio, except the difference is you're not going to get new chord voicings, you're going to get new melodies. So if I take one of those out, so now instead of having, I have this melody. And I can make a few different melodies with that. And as you can hear here, you can also change the order of the notes. So where I started with this, I can turn that into this one. And this I can use as a melody and just use as a way of creating some new lines. And if I do that in the beginning of a C blues, that sounds like this. Now we have a lot of different options, because for our C7 arpeggio, then we can play all the different inversions, and we can also start changing the order of the notes of the inversions. And in that way we have a million different melodies. And this is not the kind of thing that I would suggest you start working on sort of systematically for all types of chords in all keys or on all scale degrees. That's not really how this works. I think this is much better if you try to apply it in a place like I'm describing in the beginning. So you have one place in a song where you're missing some melodies. Well, take out that one chord and work on it a bit. And then when you're exploring this, think of it as exploring. So think of it as something you're trying out. And if you play something that resonates with you, then you can start making some licks with it. Don't just force yourself to make licks with stuff where you're thinking this doesn't sound good. That's not going to help you. You need to find the stuff that inspires you. And you can also, I think, quite easily do this several times, and different things will will resonate with you depending on what kind of coffee you had that day. Now there are of course also quite a few very famous melodies that are only using chord tones. I think one that comes to mind would be this one, only using triad arpeggio. But one thing that you can hear in this is that it's not only just up and down the arpeggio or a certain permutation of the notes, it's really making a melody with the chord tones or with the arpeggio notes, and in that is also repeating some of the notes. So that's also something we can start working with. The pattern that I was using in the previous example was this one, and that was of course coming out of playing the arpeggio in an inversion starting from the third, so from this one. And I can use that as just a starting point. Then if I try to repeat notes, see if I can come up with some melodies. So all these different melodies are still just coming out of. And then I'm just repeating some notes and really just listening to what I'm playing and trying to hear if I can add something, or if there's a note that I want to repeat, what kind of melody that would make. This is also really a good exercise for trying to play what you hear, because you have to listen to yourself to come up with new stuff, and in that way you get better at really responding to what you're hearing inside and getting that out in your solo playing. Until now I've only been using the arpeggio notes, so the chord tones, but you probably already know that most melodies and most solos don't only use chord tones. So we can also add the scale around it, as I talked about in the beginning, and that's what we're going to do now. One way of seeing the arpeggio in the context of the scale is to play the arpeggio from the root and then just add the scale notes in between. That's also what I've often referred to as the Barry Harris exercise, because that's something he does a lot. So for a C7, that would be this exercise. And really that's of course just playing the arpeggio of C7, but then adding the scale notes in between. So to build a phrase with this, if we take a simple pattern, so let's first take an inversion from the third again, because that was a nice melody. So we have this, then we change the order of the notes, so that could be maybe something like this, and then I'm repeating a note as well, so that's kind of using the previous steps, so step 3. So now I have this. Now I can start adding some scale notes in between, and some of the logical places to do this, I could do that between the G and the E here, so then I would have, and then between the C and the B flat I can go in and add one under the B flat, so, and then go down to a G at the end. Then I have this melody. And we actually kind of constructed this starting with just the basic arpeggio, and then just adding these different things to it so that we became more free to make more melodies with it by playing it in several octaves, by making inversions, changing the order of the notes, and now also adding some scale tones in between the chord tones. And that way we can actually create a lot of different, well actually we can create thousands of different licks. And of course you can get a lot more options if you go away from just using the basic arpeggio like I am here, and then also start using the arpeggio from the third or another arpeggio that fits with this chord in this context. There you can really explore a lot of interesting things. If you want to see an example of somebody who is really good at making strong melodic lines with a lot of really strong also melodic ideas, then check out this video where I'm analyzing some solo phrases from Wes Montgomery's solo on 4 and 6.